picking weeds. You didn't know I was gonna start.
But if I heard you right, you're gonna stop being picky. Is that what I heard you say?
I need to. I pulled all those silly flowers and I dug up all the roots because they're coming again. Well, now it's so warm, the little seeds are coming, so I gotta dig all.
Got to get them all up.
I gotta get them all. My
Your
flowers
yard looks so great.
Oh,
I would.
you should.
When was the last time that you picked somebody else's weeds?
Oh, yesterday when I was walking.
It's so funny to
And I
me.
carry a trash bag with me to pick up trash.
Yeah. I'm like, I'll give you my address if you just want to pick weeds.
Hey, don't pick my weeds. I mean, wait.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
This one yard, I want to go in it so bad, but I'm thinking, because I see them way up here,
See the-
They probably got cameras.
I was going to say, all of a sudden the cops come rolling up. What are you doing here, lady? I'm trying to make their yard better.
Better.
And I got moles, I'm fighting moles.
Oh, those are no fun.
And in the back, but I think I drowned them all, because my grass is real, real thick,
Mhm.
and they raised it up, and then it rained and it full of water. Well, then the mower came through, and I think they all drowned in that water.
Oh,
Now I just gotta get.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
we have moles at our old house, and they the yard guys came and put poisonous worms in the mole runs because they eat the grubs and stuff. So I guess there's some poisonous ones that they just like somehow inserted into the mole runs, and that was the treatment.
That
And
seems
then
really extreme.
we had in our new house this summer, we had one little track of, I was like, we fought these moles at our old house. They followed us
Doing it
here,
again.
you know. But these guys just put the traps down, and you
I
know.
buy this yellow container, I don't know what it's, and it's pointed,
Mhm.
and it's got little pellets in it.
Mhm.
And then at the end, I stick, where the hole is,
Mhm.
and then I open it up and drop pellets in it.
Yeah.
I got all of them right here, this is all on my side.
Yeah.
Side.
But that's supposed to take care of them.
It takes care of it.
Okay.
If
Well,
it's just
yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
but they do a lot of moving. It was so funny in my very side yard, they were so bad on this one, and I spilt it all over, and I picked up what I could.
Daisy, is your airdrop on?
I guess so. Well, if I get in trouble with them again, I'll find out from you what that stuff was.
But it's pointed on the end, and you can
Mhm.
get into the hole with it,
Mhm.
then open it and drop it. I dropped it
Yep.
before.
Well, it's just cool. She's like, I cannot wait to play on it.
I used to put gum in it, and they liked gum, but then I got it so like this, they get
Gum?
Uh,
Like chewing gum?
chew a little bit,
Yeah.
just put it in there, and I put
It does. Well, even last night, I was just looking at the poles. I was like, man, that's really small.
Just because, like, they
But
start
I think
chewing on
whenever
it
they
and
put the
then
mulch
can't
and everything
eat
in there, it's
anything
going to
else,
be
and
like,
they-
oh, yeah. Okay.
Sherry, I'm going to be honest, that sounds made up to me.
Yes. He said it's supposed to be done today. I was like,
Chewing gum to get rid of moles. See, that's the same reaction I had. Like, yeah, because they don't have teeth. You have
Yeah.
to chew it for them. So.
they're like, he had poison worms. There's like, he drowned them.
I put juicy fruit, and they sent me the notes that they wanted Wrigley's. But they do, but this thing I got from Lowe's works better than yellow with the color.
Yeah,
Is there-
works
is-
better than the gum.
Yeah, it works better than the
Is there a Greek word that really about moles? I don't know.
I don't know about how they're evil
So,
creatures.
yeah.
My son.
Yeah.
There's got to be. That's actually the sixth trumpet that we're
Yeah,
going to talk about.
that's right.
So
It's
it's
And
the
then
terror, terrible.
Instead of things coming down
Yeah.
from below, came
Oh no! Destroyed a third.
144,000 moles.
A
They
third of
destroyed
the
a third of
vegetables.
the vegetables.
Yards.
Marshall, if
Yes, ma'am.
my son-in-law sits out
Ooh.
there on a chair and real quiet, and he has a baseball bat. And he hears them. And he hears them, and when they come, boom, and he hits them.
Are there moles?
Moles. He hits them with a baseball bat.
I've never seen the ground move. Like, I see the tracks afterwards. I've never actually seen.
You can feel the vibration when they're coming
Yeah.
up.
Our dogs will dig the trenches.
Okay, this sounds like another made-up Sherry story.
Sometimes I hide things and leave it on the back porch door for me.
Bobby.
Aw, very kind.
So, how long does he sit there though? with a
We
bat?
got a
Bobby
Great
probably
Dane
sit there
and
for
then
hours
a
Okay.
like a lab
More
terrier
power
mix.
to him, man.
He's a patient.
A lab terrier mix. So they're both big dogs, but one of them will dig until he finds it. Like it's terrifying. It's not good. It's not
Okay. We've had gardens, moles, and dogs
good. Yeah.
this
we're
morning.
there now.
So,
we're good.
speaking of all those things, let's go to Revelation.
Which Revelation 9 has all of those things.
Yeah.
So
Well, maybe not. We'll find out.
Not-
We'll find
yeah.
out. So we were in Revelation 8 last week, which I didn't even bring my notes back from that class, but we were going through these different trumpets that were sounded, and all the destruction that was taking place. We know that there's 7 trumpets altogether. Chapter 8 has 4 of them listed, and the different things that happen with each one of those trumpets being sounded. There's another type of destruction that seems to take place. And we ended class last week at the end of chapter 8 talking about this this eagle / angel that was flying around, that John hears it crying out in a loud voice. And so one of the questions that we were kind of wrestling with together was whether it's an eagle or an angel. And some of your translations will call it an angel. I think more English translations nowadays use the word eagle. And from the research that, well, there were some people that had already looked up stuff at the end of class last week. And then a little bit more of the studying that I did, just really very quickly. It seems as though your King James and your New King James and maybe a couple of other the kind of the older manuscripts or versions of the Bible use the word angel because of their, at least for the King James, the source, the old ancient manuscripts that most of the King James translators used as their source material. At some point, like the oldest versions of the manuscripts that they use are probably around the 8 to 900s AD, and since we found Dead Sea Scrolls, we found earlier manuscripts since the 1600s when the King James version was originally written. Okay, and those manuscripts all use the word, or I think most, if not all, use the word eagle. The Greek word for, bird of prey. Sorry, that we translate as eagle. So it seems like the earlier manuscripts, the earlier versions of Revelation, going back to like the 2 and 3 and 400s, use that word bird of prey instead of the word angel. I think the overall concept is it's something separate from these angels that are sounding trumpets, and it is kind of hovering and flying, and just kind of a warning of what's happening next. I think what John originally intended, was eagle. That's our earlier manuscripts seem to say that, so that's what I would lean towards. I mean, if it's an angel that looks like a bird of prey,
I'm good
fine,
with that too.
Whatever. But I think probably if you're just going with more original word, is probably bird of prey. But that's why there's a difference in some of the translations, for whatever that's worth.
That's why we have different translations and stuff too, and why there's a need for more translations as the generations go. Because with the addition, or us finding the Dead Sea Scrolls, opens up, okay, because what you're trying to do is get as close to the time as possible and have as many manuscripts as possible to overlay each other, because then you have as close to the event as possible, and then all of these things say the same thing, so that's where I can get reliable information from.
Mm-hmm.
Eagles are usually thought of as majestic too.
Mm-hmm.
Angels, so it would be, when you think of angels as being majestic, so it would be
At least a
majestic,
Right.
something in the sky.
I said at the end of class last week, so again, I don't want to go too far. I don't want to spend too much time today on this from last week, but I'm not even for sure that eagle would necessarily be the right word as much as maybe a vulture or something like that, because we're talking about
less majestic.
I know they're not majestic, but it's because the word is that Greek word is any kind of bird of prey, and no, I haven't. Where these vultures be, if this is something that's circling and there's destruction that's taking place, that's what a vulture would do. If there's death about to take place, or death happening, there would be that kind of a bird hovering. So that's my thought on that.
Oh, you're good.
I like the eagles too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Picture also of an eagle flying over all the earth, warning of the terrors yet to come. While both believers and unbelievers experience the terrors who belong to the world, or the unbelievers who will meet spiritual harm through these next 3 trumpet judgments.
Yep. So there's destruction about to take place, and that's what this being, I want to say this bird of prey, is crying out. Hey, these 4 trumpets, this was really bad stuff that happened. There was a third of this is destroyed, a third of this is destroyed, a third of this is like, it's been bad. But what is coming is even worse. So, and that's where we ended class last week. Is like, man, how like
Happy little book.
And just imagine the original church that's having these words read to them. You know, hey, we got this letter from John, and you know, here's all this destruction that's taken place so far, and then the reader's like, and it's about to get worse, and he's like, oh, grief, you know, because I mean that's how I feel right now. We're getting into chapter 9, and it's going to be worse than what we've covered so far. So let's just jump into it. Let's jump into what's worse. Revelation chapter 9. I'm just going to read the first 11 verses, and then we'll kind of go through it and hopefully get through all of. Our plan is to get through all of chapter 9.
We
today.
can do it.
Yeah, that's the plan. Okay. The 5th angel, verse 1. The 5th angel sounded his trumpet, and I saw a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. The star was given the key to the shaft of the abyss, and when he opened the abyss, smoke rose from it like the smoke from a gigantic furnace. The sun and sky were darkened by the smoke from the abyss, and out of the smoke locusts came down upon the earth and were given power like that of the scorpions of the earth. They were told not to harm the grass or the earth or any plant or tree, but only those people who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. They were not given power to kill them, but only to torture them for 5 months. And the agony they suffered was like that of the sting of a scorpion when it strikes a man. During those days, men will seek death, but will not find it. They will long to die, but death will elude them. The locusts looked like horses prepared for battle. On their heads they wore something like crowns of gold, and their faces resembled human faces. Their hair was like women's hair, and their teeth were like lions' teeth. They had breastplates like breastplates of iron, and the sound of their wings was like the thundering of many horses and chariots rushing into battle. They had tails and stings like scorpions, and in their tails they had the power to torment people for 5 months. And they had as king over them the angel of the abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon, or Abaddon, however you want to say
Sounds
it.
great.
I say Abaddon. And in Greek, Apollyon. Okay, so 5th trumpet sounds, and these awful things happen. So let's go kind of back through it. What's the first thing that, when the trumpet gets sounded, what's the first thing that John sees? Okay. So he sees a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth. All right. Now, just a special note, I think is important. He doesn't, if you read this correctly, he's not watching a star fall from the sky to the earth. What does it say? It seems the way that he's written it, and I don't want to Bible nerd on you guys too much, but just the Greek grammar of this, not just the word, but like, you know, past tense, present tense, that kind of stuff. This is in the perfect tense, which is something that has happened and
completed.
We're watching now from something that started back before. Does that make sense? So more than likely, he's talking about a star. He's not saying, I saw a star fall from the sky to the earth. He's saying there was a star that had fallen from the sky to the earth, and that star is given this key to the abyss. Does that make sense? Okay. Which then brings up the question, who or what is this star? Or what does it represent? Like what? Like, there's something significant about this because, you know, it's given special,
Privileges.
yeah, and special power.
Job.
What is the representation of this particular star?
Fallen, he's fallen, angel, right?
Okay, so that's one of the prevailing theories, is that this particular star represents Satan. Why would we think that? And maybe your study Bible will say, or maybe you got
Satan
something
got
else.
out of heaven.
So we talked about this. When was it last year? I can't. It's been so long now. I can't remember when we were talking about angels and demons
Angels
and
and
all those
demons.
kinds of things. Okay, and we talked about there's verses that you can pick out of the Bible, and then of course Christian tradition talks about Satan being a fallen angel that was cast out of heaven.
Using Jesus's, and I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning.
And then using some different things that were in the Old Testament, using the word that we translate now as Lucifer, which that word in Hebrew literally means morning star, and so I don't want to go too far into the weeds here, but in the Old Testament, like that word was used, but it seems to be used in the context of, another person or a king or a kingdom falling. But maybe it's, I don't want to sound too confusing. It's imagery of Satan falling that's being applied to an earthly king. Anyway, I'm getting too confusing. So again, the popular theory, and I'm not saying it's wrong. Popular theory is that Satan is a fallen angel, and so this star would represent him having already fallen, having already been kicked out of heaven. This is Satan. Yes, ma'am.
On my version, at the very end of verse 11,
Mm-hmm.
it says in parentheses, that is destroyer.
The
Mm-hmm.
destroyer.
So
Mm-hmm.
it says that they had as king over them the angel of the abyss.
Right.
or the destroyer.
Yep.
So
Mhm.
kind of leans more back into the
Yeah.
Lucifer.
Right. So, we got. Why are you looking at me?
No, I'm just right.
we got two bookends here. I'll say it that way. Like there's
one and
locust in
another.
the middle, but we got abyss and abyss, because we got this abyss that's mentioned here in verse
First couple verses.
2, and then mentioned again in verse 11. So verses 2 and 3, we got this abyss, and the scorpions come out of it. We'll talk about them in just a minute. I mean, not scorpions, the locusts. And then we got it mentioned again, and this angel that's over it.
Where's this say abyss? Not says bottomless pit.
Same thing.
Okay.
Same thing.
Wanna make
So
sure.
that's what. Yes,
Yes.
ma'am.
I have a question.
Okay.
What is the seal of God on their foreheads?
So we talked about that back in, was that chapter 8 or 7?
It's,
Chapter 7.
7.
Where
Chapter
there's
7, verse
there's a seal that's put on the people who are servants of God. There's the people who stay faithful to God, who are in a relationship with God. They're given a seal on their foreheads, and we talked about that would be similar. It's a mark. It might be like the wax kind of seal that the scrolls and stuff were sealed up with, but it's a distinguishing mark saying these people belong to God. These people,
That's not 666.
no.
That's
That
later.
will come up later, but that's not this. This when does it mention the seal on their foreheads here in chapter 9? I'm sorry.
It just is. It talks about how the seal. There's the people that are spared. It's verse 4. They can harm.
Okay, there it
they're
is,
not
yeah.
gonna harm those
Yeah.
things, not harm people that are.
Yeah.
sealed.
So that's the people who are in the right relationship with God. I'll word it that way. Are represented by the seal on their foreheads. Yes, ma'am.
What are the people who are sealed, what are they doing during all this torture? Are they just watching,
Ooh.
hiding out?
Actually, not to dismiss your question, I think we kind of are going to talk about that a little bit at the end of chapter 9, because it could be. I think that they need to do something.
Yeah. So, for those of you watching online, the question was, what are these people with the seal on their foreheads doing? It doesn't seem like they're giving any kind of action, They're just kind of witnessing this whole thing as it happens, as it unfolds. So let me go back. These are great questions. Let me go back to the abyss part real quick. Daisy's question was her version that she's using calls it a bottomless pit. Does anybody else have that? Okay. So that's what the Greek word literally means. So the Greek word that's used here is abusos.
Oh.
And in our English letters be abussos. But it's basically a transliteration. They're just taking the Greek word and literally saying,
yep,
you know, they're calling it the abyss. But that word, that Greek word, means something without a bottom, something without depth. It is deep and void, and you can't find the edges of it, and you can't find the bottom of it. Does that make sense? It's not used a whole lot in the New Testament, but obviously it's mentioned here. Okay, and this star is given the key to it. Again, who is this star? Some people think that it's Satan. There's one issue with it being Satan, and that is when it's opened up and these locusts come out, we're going to find out, and I know we're trying not to get ahead of ourselves, but the abyss is going to be mentioned multiple times in Revelation. Okay, if
it's like a source of evil.
Yeah, and there's going to be what looks to be a representation of Satan that comes up out of it, and then later on Satan is thrown back down into it. So why would Satan be given the key to it? Now, some would say, well, he's given the key to it to open it up to allow the destruction to take place. But again, why would Satan be unlocking it and then also be coming out of it? And maybe that's true. Maybe it's just imagery is being used to say Satan has control over this bottomless pit, this abyss, but also his minions, his evil forces, he himself is also kind of bound up in it, and his presence comes up out of it. I don't know. To me, I'm not sure that it's the same person. I wonder if the star just represents something else besides Satan. It's just something that is given power to unlock this destruction. There's some people that say, like, they compared it to Nero.
Oh.
It's Nero unlocking the powers of the Roman soldiers to go, start persecuting Christians. Some have compared it to different world leaders, throughout our history that have unlocked their armies to, this is another probably Hitler reference.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of different attachments that people made to this.
What about the other fallen angels? Couldn't one of the demons
Yep.
have been already,
Right, because there were other, if we
Mm-hmm.
believe that other angels were cast down that had united themselves with Satan, were cast down with him, could this be one of them? Potentially. There's nothing specific about who this guy is, and let me say this: I feel like I'm talking a whole bunch of different circles. I'm sorry.
It's too much.
But at the end of, not at the end of this chapter, but at the end of this description of the abyss, when it says that these locusts had a king over them, and we got those names mentioned, it's not. It could be the same person, like the star and the king over them could be the same, or it could be talking about two different things. It could be something that has the power to open the abyss, but then the locusts come out have somebody else that's in charge of them. It could be one or the other.
This is not a real star, then. This is like
No.
a person
There's some person that's being represented here. Mm-hmm.
with arms and legs that
Yeah, because the star is given the key, and then he opens it, so it's not an inanimate object that like a meteorite comes
like a rock.
and covers it.
I mean,
It's
he
imagery.
says, it's a star that fell.
Really
So,
there.
I mean, is it a 5-pointed thing that, like a little face in the middle of it? And, I don't know.
A
I don't know
frowny
exactly.
face. A frowny face.
All we have is this honestly for stars, just a heavenly, what do you say? A heavenly
being.
thing.
But they call it, they say he.
Right.
He
he has a personification. He's
Mhm.
like he's animated like a person, but as John sees it, it's a star. So is he literally seeing a star, or is he saying,
Star
hey, you know how we
represents-
talk about a star falling from heaven, and that's Lucifer, like that's Satan. I saw
Mhm.
Satan. I don't know. It's your guess is as good as mine. This is what John sees. This is what John describes. Okay.
And whatever it is, he's given the power to unlock
Well, wasn't Jesus
terror.
the only one that could unlock?
Mhm.
Am I?
In the beginning, or what is that, chapter 2?
Well, I think this is a good reminder of like God is ultimately in control. You know,
Yeah.
like it's not like this it's running around on its own.
Mhm.
It's key. It's like it was gifted.
It was given the key to
Yes.
do
Yeah,
it.
like he said.
Yes, and so, but there is a theory that this is a way to talk about that the star is a way to talk about Jesus, who has the keys to life and death, the keys of heaven and hell, and there's some scripture references to that.
Yep.
So is this Jesus that opens this up and allows this destruction to take place? I feel like
We need to.
yeah, I feel like that's not. I feel like if that was the case, it would have been like God would have revealed that as the Lamb, as we've already seen, or some other thing that we see attached to Jesus besides a star.
Is this supposed to be the second coming then?
I don't think so. I don't think so.
I have so the Greek word for Satan, is that reference with any of these titles that are used for the star?
Mm.
That Jesus uses in
I
Luke?
don't think so.
Mm-mm.
Like Latin, okay.
No,
Check really quick.
Okay.
no. The word for Satan literally translates as the accuser. We talked about that before. Someone who stands and accuses. So isn't yeah. No. I'm gonna come back to that. Let's so we've got this. Okay, we got. I know. Well, y'all have asked good questions, but they come from different parts of this, and like we're gonna figure
It's
out
hard to
how
do
to
it
tie this
all
all back
together.
together here in a minute. Okay, so let's talk about what comes out of this abyss when it opens up, and then maybe we can clear this up when we get down to the end of this. Okay, so the abyss opens up, and there's a whole bunch of smoke, like smoke from a furnace. It darkens the sky, darkens the sun, which again.
We're disrupting created order.
Right, but we're also, I just want to remind you guys, like, there's imagery that John sees, and then there's more imagery that John sees that may not contradict, but it's just a different vision. For example, when trumpet number 3 or 4, I think it was 4, was sounded, what happened to the sun?
Third of it.
A third of it, was destroyed, right? But now we got what seems to be the full sun being blackened out by, the furnace. Could he be saying like the 2/3 of the sun that was left is now blackened out by the smoke? Sure, but I'm just saying like it's just different imagery. He's just now I had this vision, now I have this vision. Okay, but it's this huge amount of smoke that comes out, and then out of the smoke comes what? Locusts, and we've the first thought that comes to my mind is the plague of locusts back in
Yep.
Exodus chapter 10, where the locusts are sent against the kingdom of Egypt and destroy a whole bunch of the crops and stuff. But these locusts are a little bit different. Okay, they're similar. I mean, locusts in general are similar to grasshoppers. They usually eat vegetation, but these guys are given power like scorpions, and they're told specifically what in verse 4.
Don't harm the grass of the earth or plant or tree.
Okay, so which is interesting. They're told not to do what is in their nature to do. At least typical locusts. Typical locusts are going to destroy trees and vegetation. These locusts are told specifically not to harm the trees or vegetation. What are they supposed to, I guess, attack? People who don't have the seal on their foreheads. Okay, and this going back to your question. It's in chapter 7, verses 3 and 4, where you got this 144,000 who are given the seal on their foreheads. If you missed that, go back on our YouTube page. Go back to that's Revelation chapter 7, verses 3 and 4, because we talked about the seal on their forehead. So I'm just going. Quick answer today is people who are dedicated to God. They've been faithful to Him. They're in a right relationship with Him.
Yep. And they have, as Paul would say in Ephesians, they have the Holy Spirit of God that's in them. That is a deposit or a seal.
A seal guaranteeing.
Guaranteeing their future.
Yep. Okay. So they're not given the power. These locusts are not given the power to kill, though.
Huh, worse.
What are they given the power to do? Okay, to torture people, to sting people like scorpions for 5 months.
And during those days, people will wish to be dead, but they will not find it. They will long. I've never been in this moment where I'm like, I want death to come so it can all be over, but that death never comes.
Why
5 months?
Yeah, good question.
Brandon, why 5
Oh,
months?
I don't know. I'm going to be honest with you.
It's there's there's different opinions. One that I saw actually looking up stuff this morning was that if you got 12 months in the year, you got 5 months of stuff going bad, and then you got 7 months of a reprieve. We talked about how 7 is a number of completion, but it's also on the seventh day. What did God do when He created everything? What was the seventh day used for God's people? The Sabbath day, which was a day of rest. And so, is it representative of you have this time of torture and wishing for death, but then there's going to be a reprieve where we can rest from it? I think this kind of goes back to the whole 1/3 thing. Me personally, we can come up with a whole bunch of different opinions of why it's 5 months. I think ultimately this is not everlasting torture.
Mm-hmm.
This is not everlasting stinging and wishing for death. There's just a period of it that's going to last for a while, but then it's going to be done. There's an end in sight. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. If there's 144,000
Mm-hmm.
that have got the seal,
Mm-hmm.
could this be like, there's billions of people on Earth. Okay, so could this be that's all that there was left is these 144,000? I mean, the Earth has been, like there's been wars and everything, and billions of people have died,
Mm-hmm.
and all there's left is this 144,000 who've got the seal, plus all these other people who
Mhm.
don't.
Mm-hmm.
Is that anything
That's-
in that?
You kind of go back to our discussion on that, though, of are we talking about 144,000 souls? Like that's the
literally
number of actual people? Because in which case, the odds that we make it into or that we've missed it are very great, that we're
Or
not
dead.
a part. Or we're dead. Exactly.
That's what I'm
Yeah.
thinking.
Yeah.
This is the only ones that are left.
Right.
It's
So
144,000.
does it go back to are those actual physical people, or is that number 144,000 a signifier of, because that's, what was it, 12 times 12 times 10 times 10 times 10 which is just a number of completion, a number of all people that have accepted Christ, all people that have the seal of God on their foreheads, all people that live according to the Spirit and walk in the Spirit. Is it one of those things? And so I think where we came down was that it's more than likely, I mean, that would be, I feel like it'd be out of God's character to say we've got right now on the planet 7.9 billion people, much less all the people that are going to live in the future and that have lived in the past.
But only 144,000.
But only 144,000 of those people. That's it. That's all we've got. Oh yeah, heaven's not ultimately big. We only have that many rooms in our mansion, so I got to fill them.
Yeah.
I think it's more than likely that we're talking about, because that's what he says. Anybody with the seal, and then Paul calls that the Spirit of God. So my inclination is more that it's not 144,000 people as much as it is everybody that belongs to Christ and is sealed and has the Spirit inside of them.
And we talked about that when we talked about Revelation 7 for sure.
Yeah.
And there's a distinction there where John doesn't count
Right.
this group of people and go, okay, 1, 2, 3. He hears the number said is 144,000. Then he turns and looks and sees a multitude that can't be counted,
All tribes,
who are all
all
given
tongues, all
white robes and stuff like that. And so, like Brandon's saying, the number itself is more a representation we think of just
Church as a
there's
whole.
a complete group of people who have been saved, who have been had their robes washed in the blood of the Lamb, who have been given the seal, who are sealed by the Holy Spirit, who are in this right relationship with God. Is it a little 144,000? No, there's a complete number of them.
Okay, so, of course, when this was written, there was no such thing as the United States, it was,
Mhm.
like that. So, the people that are reading this for the first time,
Mm-hmm.
they probably could see 144,000.
Mhm.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
And I think they would have a better understanding than we're able to about. They might hear, just like John heard, 144,000, and then in their minds, without any work, all the work that we have to do, be like, okay, I understand that vision, or I understand what God was trying to communicate to John in that moment. And I think we just have to work a lot harder to
Yeah.
get there, if we can even
Yeah,
get there.
We really can't. It's over my head.
You know, the way you're
I've asked this question.
sitting and everything.
So when Jesus comes back, the rapture's gonna occur, all the people come out of their graves, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their souls come out of their graves.
Mm-hmm.
We're left, I love those left behind movies.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
That's what's gonna happen.
We'll talk about that later. Not to dismiss the question, but
Yeah. It's
and that's not even in Revelation.
well, it's quick answer is we are going to get to it later, but no, because people take 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, which talks about the trumpet sounding, Jesus coming. Those
Meeting in
who
the
are
air.
dead in Christ will rise first, and we'll meet him in the air, and then the rest of us who are living will meet him in the air and go to be with him forever. And people will take that, and then what we're going to end up on down the road here in Revelation, and trying to combine those two things together. And there's some correlation. I feel like it's a stretch to say, to almost do what has traditionally, or at least over the last century, become the picture of the rapture, where all of a sudden people are just sucked up and gone, and everybody else, there's a whole bunch of people still left here. Because what's described in 1 Thessalonians 4 says nothing about people being left behind. It just says the people who are connected with Jesus are going to meet him in the air and go to be with him forever. So
You gotta remember, like, the Left Behind series, I watched that, I really loved it, but it's fiction.
yeah,
They're taking bits and
but
pieces.
but there's some scriptures that it's based on. I'm just saying I know that's really popular, and I know and there's people who are a lot smarter than I am who have come to that conclusion that there's going to be all the 144,000 or whatever group of people that represents. They're gone to go be with Jesus, and then there's still humankind left on earth, and they missed out. They got left behind because they didn't do what they were supposed to do.
Whoops.
And I'm not for sure that that's what the Bible actually describes is going to happen when Christ comes again, because there's other verses that talk about when he does come again, everything's going to be destroyed. So we're talking about 144,000 going to be with him, and then those who are left behind are all going to be destroyed. Or, there's those that say, well, they're going to be living here on earth and given another chance after they go through it, and then when we get to the whole tribulation and stuff like that, to suffer through some things and then have another chance to try to become Christians and then be taken. And I think we're trying to grab too many things and try to wedge them together. To use the word rapture, which I can't remember if rapture is even if that's
so.
our word. I don't think it's actually used in Scripture. I think that's our word. That imagery of people being taken up and gone is strictly from 1 Thessalonians 4, but it doesn't. Not everything in 1 Thessalonians 4. We add more to it, I guess. The whole left behind part. I'm not answering that very well. We are going to get there when we get to a little further in chapter 20. Yes, ma'am.
Silly question.
Hold on just a second. Go ahead, Lou.
Doesn't it refer to in
There's some kind of judgment that takes place. Yeah. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Do you believe in pre-trib, or mid-trib, or post-trib?
Well, see, this is where you got to get into the whole. What do you believe about the tribulation? Is there a 7-year period of torture and bad things happening that Christians have to suffer through, that the whole world has to suffer through? Is there rapture and then the pre-trib? Does the rapture happen first and then the tribulation happens? There's mid-trib where the tribulation is happening and halfway through it, the rapture happens and then the tribulation continues on. Or do all of us as humankind go through the tribulation together and then the rapture happens after that? Well, part of that depends on if you believe that there's going to be a 7-year period of suffering, a thing called the tribulation that we suffer through. And part of that comes from Daniel, and part of that comes from what we've already kind of mentioned, tribulation here in Revelation. You want to jump in here? You're just like, yeah, keep going.
No.
Keep digging your hole.
We've talked about it just a little bit.
Yeah.
But that I think to talk about that would take a whole class to talk about pre-tribulation, mid-tribulation, post-tribulation,
Which we
then
probably
to have
should.
and to have honestly going through all of the little leaf thing that you have that has all of those
The
references
premillennial
and stuff.
and postmillennial and all that kind of-
amillennialism, all the things.
So let's do this. I don't want to dismiss your question. I'm going to put a bookmark on it for now, and we'll talk either next week or here in a couple weeks, maybe before we get to chapter 12.
Yeah, I'm wondering if
Before
we
we
do
get into
that
the
like
dragon and
right
that kind of
before we do chapter 21, New Heaven and New Earth, of like the 1,000
Yeah.
years, judgment of Satan.
Yeah,
judgment
because
of
the 1,000-year reign is mentioned there too.
Yeah, because you can kind of we can take a pause in the action and just talk about what those things
those
are.
different things. So if we can just put a book, like, we won't forget about it.
I know
No, we
there's
won't, because it's important.
in the commentaries that in the commentaries that I'm looking at too, it's like here's all these things, and then they'll take multiple chapters just to talk about, pre-trib, post-trib, mid-trib, premillennialism, postmillennialism, amillennialism, tribulation.
And so that's when I was trying to answer your question. Like, I'm not for sure that I'm fully sold on there being a literal 7-year period of worldwide suffering that we typically think of the tribulation.
Physical.
Because a lot of that imagery actually comes from the book of Daniel and may have already taken place. So I'll have to do some more study on that, I feel like it would be important to kind of throw out, not necessarily every view of it, but kind of the major perspectives of the tribulation, millennialism, pre-trib, all that kind of stuff, and rapture and everything, so that we know what we're talking about. So it's a very good question. I think it would be better for us to devote like an entire class time to talking about it instead of trying to wedge it into this.
Yeah,
Is that okay?
I would hate just to.
Okay.
Yes. I hate to touch on it, but then to not get there. So
Yeah.
if we don't get there.
That's right. Yeah, if we're going to finish this chapter, we're going to move fast. All right.
So close.
So, locusts. Okay. We stopped at verse 6. Men are wishing for death and still staying alive. So we get back to the locusts again in verses 7 through 10. So here's what they look like. They got something like crowns of gold, whether it's an actual crown or just there was something golden-ish glowing, on top of their heads. Some people think that's more like a halo. Who knows? It's something goldish.
That would.
Right. It seems like, the way that he describes them with wings and everything, I think it would be hard to picture unless you had like an artist kind of draw it out. But think grasshopper, but with some kind of a golden crown, a human face, hair like a woman's hair, which I don't know what the like Yeah, is it just long and flowing? Maybe.
Is there a certain amount of honor or put togetherness?
Yeah, I don't know.
That's like what you're supposed to see.
Teeth like lions, and then they have armor. So they have this breastplate of iron, but they're flapping wings, and the wings sound like horses and chariots going into battle. But then, which grasshoppers, locusts don't have these long tails, but these do. So at the end of their torso or whatever, well, I don't know what the different parts of an insect are called, but is this basically a scorpion's tail, and that's what they use to attack people with. It can sting people for 5 months. So it's bizarre looking locust. It's for sure.
The struggle between the thing that John sees in trying to write it down, because I don't even know if you can draw that. I'm sure people have to try and draw it. But then there's like the sounds that he's hearing, the whole vision, like he's moved by it because its wings sound like 100 horses and stuff too. Like, I mean, this is he's feeling this and experiencing it. He's trying to write it down, and he's trying.
Yeah.
God bless his soul.
And it's probably just John, just like, I don't even understand what I'm seeing, but here's what I'm seeing, and just writing it down. Okay. So we talked about how, there's locusts, the plague of locusts in chapter 10, but there's another significant place in the Old Testament where locusts are talked about. And we've actually talked about in this class when we're going through the different prophets, the minor prophets. And we went through the book of Joel, and which, don't worry if you don't remember, but God speaking through Joel describes this plague of locusts, but also uses that imagery to describe this invading army that's going to come sweeping into the land and conquer his people. Okay,
just like locusts would come and strip all of the land of its nutrients,
swarming into the land and devour everything. This army was going to come and do the same thing. Now, some of the imagery there in Joel chapter 1, he talks about these locusts having, teeth like lions, and he talks about these. You kind of bounce back and forth between actual locusts and these soldiers that have armor and breastplates and all that kind of stuff. So it's the same imagery as these Old Testament prophets, with this sweeping destruction coming down onto the earth. Does that make sense? And that's what these locusts seem to do. Now, I'll just throw this theory out there and move on quickly. This is, if you go back to the one perspective, like, what are these locusts representing? Is it just torture? Is it just time, torturous time on earth? I mean, Brandon's come across people that think these are what?
Well, I mean, if we're taking that same stuff from Joel, and these locusts are actually an army coming, well, the locusts are actually the Apache helicopters that coming. They've got a Stinger.
It's got
driven by man.
Armor.
They can they can sting you, like all this stuff too. So yeah,
be drones. So
and then
here in the last several decades, that's become a popular theory. Is that it's a military army,
tanks.
Yeah, using these things that can cause destruction, not total annihilation, but some, obviously, it's probably some destruction, or.
I don't think that view is correct, by the way. I don't think either. I think we can.
You could, the people who think that Revelation is talking about, it was written before the destruction of Jerusalem and talking about events leading up to the destruction of Jerusalem. Could this be talking about the Roman army that is sweeping down into
Judea
and taking over? And again, at least at first, not total destruction, but causing a lot of hurt and problems.
Chariots that are like tanks at the time coming in.
Yeah.
In 5 months.
I don't know. That's
a good question.
Studied that for sure to find out. It's a good question.
No, it happened in AD 70.
All we know for sure is that there's destruction taking place, and kind of like the thirds of chapter 8, it's not total, but it's bad enough that people wish they could die.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know. Has anybody ever been stung by a scorpion? I haven't. Has anybody? Is it bad?
It's painful.
It seems like it's bad. Yeah.
Burning.
Yeah. I wonder what it would compare to, like a jellyfish or something like that. My son's been stung by a jellyfish. And I'm wondering if it's that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not going to try it, but anyway.
Why don't we take next class?
Yeah. So, yes, I'm sorry.
I'm very little.
Yes.
Remember, I had trouble with angels and demons.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really the literal.
Mm-hmm.
But the only is if this is just historical,
Mm-hmm.
is this to show us what they went through? It's not, which I want to believe. I want to
Mhm.
believe this was all happened.
Yeah.
It was done.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I guess I'm wondering what the purpose then is.
If it.
You know, of all of it. It's just like the visions and all this. It
Mhm.
has already happened. We can't do anything about it, so, you
Mhm.
know, it's just a sad story. But the Bible's not just sad stories.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or
Yeah.
good stories.
So, good question. What's the purpose of all this? We're going to come up with an answer. Let's move fast and
Yeah.
get down to verse. Okay. So, all right. We'll do this quick. We can do this.
Just
I
read-
know
you
we
just
can
wanna
do
read it?
this. Well,
Yeah,
let me
go for
let me
it.
do this about the in verse 11 when these scorpions come out, they have a king over them, who is the angel of the abyss. Again, is that the same thing as the star that opened the abyss? I don't know. Could be the same, or it could be different people. They have some kind of leader over them, some kind of angel over this abyss, whose name in Hebrew is Abaddon or Abaddon, and in Greek is Apollyon. Both those words, the Hebrew word and the Greek word, both mean a destroyer or one who causes destruction. The Greek word is basically the noun version of the verb apolumi, which means to utterly destroy. And this Hebrew word is actually used a handful of times in the Old Testament, always in the context of destruction. Okay? That's just a real quick summation of that. So this, whoever has the power over these locusts, wears the name destroyer, which is what these locusts do. They destroy things. Specifically told not to destroy what this time? Don't destroy the grass, don't destroy the vegetation, but attack human beings, right?
But
Okay,
not
so
kill them.
there's, huh?
But not kill them.
But not kill them. Okay,
Not destroy the people.
so verse 12, that's the first woe. Remember the eagle, the
Eagle
thing that was
jumping.
flying, said that there's going to be 3 woes, because he said, whoa, 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 and then here they come. So that was the first of this really awful thing, okay? Verses 13 through 19. I'll read it real fast. The sixth angel sounded his trumpet and heard a voice coming from the horns of the golden altar that is before God, and said to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the 4 angels who are bound to the great river Euphrates, and the 4 angels who have been kept ready for this very hour and day and month and year were released to kill 1/3 of mankind. The number of the mounted troops was 200 million. I heard their number, or there's some translations say it's like, what is it,
Twice 10,000 times 10,000.
Yeah, twice 10,000 times 10,000. The horses and riders I saw in my vision looked like this. Their breastplates were fiery red, dark blue, and yellow as sulfur. The heads of the horses resembled the heads of lions, and out of their mouths came fire, smoke, and sulfur. 1/3 of mankind was killed by the 3 plagues of fire, smoke, and sulfur that came out of their mouths. The power of the horses was in their mouths and in their tails, for their tails were like snakes, having heads with which they inflict injury. So we got these locusts that inflict injury with scorpion tails, and now we have these horses that inflict injury with snake tails, and they got fire breathing out of their heads, and their heads are like lions, and they have this armor on, and they destroy how much of mankind? 1/3. So again, for me, like you brought this up before. Are we looking at a description of the same thing from different perspectives? We've already had 1/3 of mankind destroyed by one of these trumpets. When the waters were poisoned, right? When the thing
Yep.
came from heaven
They drank from them.
and hit, and there was 1/3 of mankind that died then. So is this another third? So now we're down to only 1/3 of humankind left, or are we reset back to 0?
Just another view.
The sun is back to being whole now, but now it's covered up by the smoke, and mankind is back, but now we got 1/3 of it destroyed. Again, I think it's more about the imagery than the specific number. This is these horses that have been set loose, these angels have been set loose riding on these horses, are allowed to bring destruction, but not complete destruction of everyone and everything. There's a limit to it. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sort of like God's limited Job, the devil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very similar. Mm-hmm.
And I think we can end in our last 5 minutes talking about these things in particular. If you just take it literally, right now, if this were to happen right now, a third of mankind is actually destroyed. This is 2.6 billion with a B, 2.6 billion people that are destroyed by these angels / locusts / horses. 2.6 billion people. And then, I mean, just if that were to happen today, I mean, COVID was a destruction on mass proportions and stuff too. Lots of fear, lots of, honest respect for the terror of what that was. And all of our lives were changed as we're hiding and hunkering down, realizing the effects of what COVID really is. But 2.6 billion people, I mean, imagery or not, a third, that is substantial. That is billions of God's created people, whether they believe in him or not, that perish. That's a really big deal. Now to go back to verse 4, they were told to harm not the grass of the earth or any plant of the tree, but only those who did not have the seal of God on their foreheads. And going back to, we ended this class last week and the week before. At least it's my perspective, may not be all of our perspective, at least it's my perspective that all of these things are happening to those that do not have the seal of God on their heads, that don't have the Spirit, they're not God's people. All these things happen. And if it's affecting 2.6 billion people, not God's people, but 2.6 billion people, that should be hey, something is wrong. Something is drastically and innately wrong with what's happening. We talked, I think it was 2 weeks ago, about how seriously we take car alarms or fire alarms or something. How serious do we take tornado drills and stuff too? And that, sometimes it's like a car alarm, like, just some kid bumped into a car and it's not a big deal. Sometimes it's a big deal. Sometimes it's somebody that's stealing a car that needs to be stopped. Sometimes there's an actual fire and I need to take that alarm seriously and move out of the area. Sometimes it's the tornado is right on top of you and the alarm that's sounding isn't just, hey, maybe think about it. It's, hey, get in your bunker, get down, because stuff is about to happen. And I think all of these trumpets, at least 1 through 6, are these alarm bells that are going off. Because in verse 20...
This is coming back to your question, Lou. What is the reason behind all this? Look at verses 20 and 21. Go ahead.
I think that this is how you paint what we've just read. Like, these are the lenses that we need to read what we just read. Verse 20, the rest of mankind who were not killed by these plagues, so the rest of those people, the other 2/3 of the earth, that were not killed by these plagues, still, I have it in my Bible circled and underlined, still did not repent of the work of their hands. They did not stop worshiping demons. They did not stop worshiping idols of gold, silver, bronze, stone, and wood, idols that they cannot see or hear or walk, and nor do they repent of their murders, their magical arts, their sexual immorality, or their thefts. So these alarm bells are blaring, and these 2/3 left of the population could care less. They could care less. And this is where Marshall has said a bajillion times of, like, this judgment, as terrible as it is a warning call and a siren to these other 2/3 to say, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. There is a way to get out of this, as a get out of trumpet free card, of, like, man, all of these things, they're all sounds of repent, walk away from that life and choose a life where you are sealed, where you are saved, where you walk with Christ, because anybody that has the seal of God on their foreheads is not affected by these things. And so these people, the rest of mankind, has an opportunity to say, just like in the plagues in Exodus, all of those 10 things happened. It wasn't till the very end, whenever God took the things that mattered most to those Egyptians, for them to wake up and say, oh, this is for real. And we need to move away. And when you repent of the things that we've done.
Well, and you see it in Israel's history too. Israel and Judah both. Like, God sends prophets, God sends plagues, God sends armies, God, like all these different things. And God even says, I begged you. I sent prophets and you killed them. I sent plagues and you just kept doing what you were doing anyway. I sent famine and all your crops died. And you're like, what a shame. Let's go pray to these other gods. And all these things that I did to try to get you to change, and you didn't. So he ended up allowing armies to come in and destroy them, because there's consequences to our choices. And it's what Moses said back at the beginning, before they ever entered the promised land. You guys walk away from God, here's the consequences of that. There's consequences to that. And John kind of takes a moment here in the middle of all this destruction and all these awful things that are happening with each one of these trumpets blowing, and saying, first of all, this is not God being mean or vindictive. There's consequences to the choices that we make. And the people who are suffering these things have brought it upon themselves. And yet, even though people suffer consequences because of their sinful choices, they still continue to sin. Like, that hasn't changed in mankind's history. And it's kind of a question for us. Because who are the ones, going back to your question, Linda, who are the ones that are not experiencing this, at least at this point? The people with the seal on their foreheads, right? The people who are in the right relationship with God. They're not having to experience this destruction. Now, we can get into more discussion about, is this literal? What does it represent? But ultimately, the spiritual question hangs there no matter what.
Today, for us.
What kind of connection do I have with Jesus? What kind of relationship do I have? And when I see people suffer consequences because of their addictions, because of their choices in their marriages, because of how they treat people, whatever, does that do anything to me? Or do I say, shame for them, but I'll be fine? And I keep going down the same path. Because that's what's being described here. People who saw people suffering consequences from God and still choosing to do those things anyway. Which one am I? Which group would I belong to? That's the question. And going back to the title of this whole class, if we're one of the ones with the right relationship with God, we're blessed.
And we have a responsibility as those that have the seal of God on our foreheads, with the Spirit inside of us, to realize that, like, man, whenever plagues come, that may not be enough for our friends to believe in Jesus. But what responsibility do I have in showing Jesus in my workplace and showing Jesus to the people that I care about most? Mm-hmm. Because there's a real visceral reality of the fact that I have friends that, unless something happens in their soul, that they are not going to be in heaven with us. And that should stir, like, these visions and that understanding should stir us emotionally. People be like, are you okay with that? Are we okay with it? Am I okay with my friend, my buddy, who is a good person but doesn't have Christ? Am I okay with this being an actual reality for my friend?
Were you going to ask something else?
I forgot what it was.
Okay.
Apologies.
Do you think this happened in past history, like during Hitler, and it's just happening over and over again, or it's...
It could be.
How could Hitler not have been?
It's, well...
Many Antichrists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There's been different characters throughout history. I mean, when we were talking about the trumpet and the thing that destroyed the plague and stuff, there's people that said, oh, that was the bubonic plague back in the Middle Ages. That's what that was. You know, you can make different attachments to different things. I think we have to be careful about that and really get more down to what is it that God is trying to tell me, which is what we come back to here. What is God trying to tell me in all this imagery? If it is a historical character, if all this stuff has already happened, is there still stuff, this is what Lou was asking, is there still stuff that I can learn from this? Absolutely. There are consequences to the choices that we make. Whether these things have already happened or whether they're still waiting for us in the future, the point is, I want to be one of the sealed. I want to be one with the white robe. I want that. Because I don't want negative consequences. And, like Brandon was saying, I want other people to be a part of that too. That should be on our hearts. Like, who is it that, if this was literal or even if it's just imagery, who is it that I know that would be begging for this to stop and it's not stopping because of the choices that they're making? They're experiencing negative things in their lives, hurtful things, and wishing they would stop. And I have the answer to how their lives could be better, to how they could find peace and relief from the suffering that they're going through because of their choices, and I don't do anything about that. I don't want to inflict guilt on anybody. But it's like that's what we can learn from the stuff that we're going through, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm.
There's consequences to inaction too.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're past time, so we'll put a bookmark here. Man, great questions today.
Mm-hmm.
Great questions, and we may start next week just coming back for a second and talking a little bit more about these horses and angels. Not for very long. We'll go ahead and jump into chapter 10, and we will pick a day to talk about the tribulation and the rapture and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, thank you guys.